Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about navigating the difficult relationship. From simple disagreements to emotionally abusive behaviors, you deserve respect and kindness. All the information on this show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. I'm your host, Paul Coliani. Welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. I am glad that you are here listening. I'm not glad that you have a reason to listen, but I'm glad that you're here listening and hopefully getting some value from what I talk about over here. And I received a message from someone a while back, actually, that talked about how they became abusive reactively. So a reactive abuse situation where you're in a relationship that someone is being hurtful to you. And no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try to tell them that they're hurting you, or just showing them your sadness or your hurt expression or crying or anything like that, if you're in a relationship where somebody is mistreating you and maybe they're intimidating you or bullying you or insulting you or just making you feel bad overall, and you can't get them to stop, you might become reactively abusive. You might react in a way that is similar or worse than them. And the reason you might do that is because you've tried everything else. You've tried maybe telling them, you've tried all those symptoms that I told you about, crying and showing them that you're hurt and showing them that you're sad, or maybe you're growing into a depressive state. If you've tried all that, or just it happened naturally because you can't figure out how else to communicate with them in a way that causes them to stop, then you might take that drastic measure of becoming abusive yourself, or at least manipulative or controlling in ways that are similar or worse than them. And when that happens, surprisingly, you will be able to communicate with them, or at least most of the time, you'll be able to communicate with an abusive person when you act that way back. I'm not recommending this. I'm not saying that you should do it. I'm just saying that the statistics are surprising in the sense that when you are like someone who is hurting you, they are more likely to listen. Again, I'm not promoting it. It only gets worse. If you do this, it will get worse. At least it'll stay the same, which is bad enough, but it probably will get worse. You don't want to do this. But from the conversations I've had with the victims of emotionally abusive behavior, when they started doing reactive abuse, it seems that's when the other person stopped doing certain things. But it always got worse. It always got worse for them, because not only are you now in the cycle of emotionally abusive behavior, or even worse types of abuse, you are also energizing it. So you are not only in the formula that makes up abuse in the relationship, but now you are giving energy to it. So I definitely don't recommend reactive abuse, but I do want to let you know that in a lot of cases, probably most, when you are abusive back, you finally are heard. They finally listen. Most people that are doing this, they finally listen to you. And then it doesn't mean they'll stop. It just means now they hear you. They might have been in some sort of righteous, selfish state before, but then when you came back at them with something they didn't expect, now they're listening. Doesn't mean they'll change. Most of the time, probably 99% of the time, they won't change. They'll just continue their behaviors, and also including your behaviors and even fueling their behaviors because of your behaviors. That's why I definitely, there's many reasons I don't recommend reactive abuse, but sometimes it happens. This is what happens, is that there's a buildup that happens inside of you when you're in an emotionally abusive relationship. You start to realize that you will never be heard or understood or listened to, at least when it comes to the hurtful behavior stopping. So if you say, hey, that hurts, please don't do that, some statement like that, and they don't stop, and you say it again the next day, hey, please don't do that, it hurts, and it doesn't stop, then there's a buildup. It's what I call a threshold. You will reach your threshold. And that threshold is the tipping point. It's when you say, I can't take it anymore. I got to do something. And so that something can become reactive abuse. That something can become, you better change or I'm leaving. Or you better change or else. You better stop doing that behavior or else. It could even become you exploding. Like, oh, you son of a... And you just get so angry. And then it subsides. And then you go back to where you were. Then that's not good either. So you could have an explosion of some sort. And they might back off or not. But then you might go back to that homeostatic state that you're in. Meaning the new normal that the relationship became. If the new normal has been emotionally abusive or physically abusive or whatever abusive behavior for many years, that is your homeostatic state. That's your new state of being. That state, as you know, sucks. That is a terrible state to be in. Your homeostatic state, your state of being, should not be surviving with somebody and hoping they change so that you don't have to walk on eggshells. You should not be in a constant state of hoping someone will change. You should be in a constant state of, I don't even have to think about it. I don't have to think about that at all because that person doesn't behave that way. That's where you should be. I think that's where every person should be. And you can take my should and leave it if you want. But I believe in that kind of should. You should not have to be in a state of walking on eggshells. You should be free to be yourself. You should be free to be accepted as the person you are. You should not have to worry all the time about what somebody else thinks about what you say or do. That should be your homeostatic state. That should be your normal. Not a new normal, a normal. That is the normal, healthy, happy, or at least happier way to be. My opinion, I could be wrong, but in my experience, been doing this for a long time, it's best to be in a state of not worrying all the time. Not being stressed about what you do or say is going to light someone up and cause them to say or do something that is hurtful, or that systematic drip feeding of emotionally abusive behavior that no one else seems to notice. You know, a lot of people don't notice emotionally abusive behavior because it is a daily drip feeding. That's what I like to call it, a daily drip feeding of making you feel bad, making you feel responsible for the problems that are happening in the relationship and everywhere else, making you the bad guy. And when you are fed that day after day and you feel like you can't do anything right, it's going to feel oppressive. You are going to feel oppressed. In fact, in my Healed Being program, I help emotionally abusive people change. And one of the analogies that I use is that the victim of emotional abuse is in an emotional prison. And you, the emotional abuser that I'm talking to, is the prison guard. And you control their behavior. You control what they can do or say. Even not, it doesn't always have to be directly. It can be indirectly. A lot of emotionally abusive people are indirect. They are controlling and manipulative in a covert way. So that covert emotional abuse is when they do it sort of out of the public eye and out of your conscious awareness sometimes. Sometimes it's very conscious. Sometimes they know what they're doing, and sometimes you can see what they're doing. And sometimes it's not so conscious. Sometimes it's under the radar. So you can't really tell what's going on, but you know something is because you don't feel good walking on eggshells. You're not sure what's going to happen from day to day. And you're constantly hoping it doesn't happen again. I know it's all bad news I'm talking about, but I'm getting to a message actually that I received. And it's important to have this kind of foundation of where you are. What is your state of mind on a day-to-day basis? It's helpful to understand what your foundation is every day. Your foundation of at least your emotional state, your train of thought. What is your foundation? When you are in silence, let's just say that you are in some sort of controlling or manipulative or emotionally abusive relationship right now, and they leave for the day. Now you have some, unless you have kids, but let's just say that you have some silence in a room on your own, and you just sit there. Where do your thoughts go? Where do they come from? Where do they lead you? How about your emotions? What emotions are you feeling? Are you sitting in silence, wondering about life and being curious about what life's possibilities are? What's to come in your life? Are you sitting there in peace? Are you having thoughts that aren't stressful? They're just thoughts? Or, this is the big or is there some low level or mid-level or high level amount of stress in your thoughts and emotions? In other words, can you sit there in silence and be good inside yourself? Feel good. Feel a sense of peace inside yourself. And I'm just talking about the relationship here. I'm not talking about the kids knocking on the door or screaming in the house if you have kids. I'm not talking about your job, how it might stress you out, because in most situations you can leave your job and you still have that peaceful time away from it. And hopefully you can leave it there. But the relationship is kind of all there. It's all encompassing. It's permeating or have permeated your life. The relationship has. And so you are sitting there with another person in your life. Can you be at peace inside yourself with the knowledge that this other person is in your life? When you're in a relationship, your identity is intertwined with the other person's identity. You become three people. You, them, and us. So, this is my viewpoint, my philosophy, but that's how I see it. I am with my wife, Asha. I am me by myself. I am also a part of her. She is a part of me. She is a part of my life, and I am a part of hers. And then together, we make that third entity, that third person. And that third person does things. We go out, we experience life, we do things together. We experience movies together. We experience emotions together. We have long conversations together. So there are three people or entities in our relationship. Again, my perspective. And the healthy relationship is when both people can live their own lives and feel good being on their own and feel accepted being themselves around the other person. So that when they're working on something, when they're reading a book, when they're watching TV, when they're out with their friends, that person can feel like they don't have to check in. That person can feel like they're not going to get in trouble for being themselves, for doing what they want to do. That person feels autonomous, like they can live their life independently and then come home to this relationship with the other person and then complete that identity again. Doesn't mean you are defined by that identity. It just means when you get into a relationship with another person, your identities become intertwined. They become merged sometimes, but not so much that you lose yourself. And that's important. Neither person should lose themselves in the relationship, because you want to keep your independence and your autonomy. And it doesn't mean you want to be separate from them. It just means you want to be an individual. And so I don't know if you need to hear this or not, but In the typical emotionally abusive relationship, the individuality that you used to have is no longer there. That's typically what happens, is that you lose your individuality. You lose your sense of who you are. It is almost taken away, even though there's a sense of also letting it go in some ways. And I don't want to say that as any form of victim shaming or anything like that. But there is a sense of adapting that happens. There's something that happens in that type of relationship where many victims will adapt to the hurtful, manipulative, controlling person. Again, overt or covert. They will adapt so that the relationship can continue. And of course, if you're adapting to that kind of relationship, then what you're continuing is an unhealthy homeostatic state, an unhealthy new normal. The old normal, the good normal, in my opinion, is when both people can show up as themselves and both are accepted by each other. And then they can hold hands walking into the sunset, sharing experiences. It becomes unhealthy when one or both people start compromising who they are. Typically, the emotionally abusive person will not compromise who they are. So if they are not all good, if they have some bad qualities, some unhealthy qualities, and they won't compromise on those things, meaning give in or hold back and work on those things. They work on some unhealthy qualities inside themselves. If they won't compromise and you choose to compromise, you choose to adapt, then the abuse cycle continues. And again, it doesn't mean it's your fault. In fact, most of the kindest, most generous, supportive, compassionate, loving, caring people are the ones who adapt. They are the ones who give the benefit of the doubt. They're the ones who are apologize first, typically. They are the ones who might let someone off the hook fast or faster. And those are amazing qualities. I never want you to lose those qualities. If that's you, which I think it is, at least most people that listen to this show, never lose those qualities. Don't compromise that part of yourself. What needs to happen is you might have to compromise the lack of boundaries. You might have to compromise the lack of confidence in yourself, the lack of faith in yourself, the lack of trust that you have in your own decision making, and the lack of knowing you have good perception, meaning knowing what you see is what is happening. And I know what happens in these types of relationships is that you are often fooled into thinking that you're the problem. You are often tricked into thinking that you did something wrong, which is why, because of your caring, kind, compassionate nature, you're willing to look at yourself, reflect on what you did, what you said, and then make some changes, because you don't want to hurt somebody else. The other person who doesn't make changes and doesn't seem to mind or doesn't seem too fazed by you feeling hurt, that's a problem. That's not healthy love. If Asha ever seems hurt by something I said or did, man, it crushes me. I hate that feeling. I hate knowing that I hurt someone I care about. And I'm fully transparent here. If you listen to my previous episodes, I wasn't always that way. But something switched in me many, many years ago. Something shifted for me. And I finally understood that I was the cause of all the problems in the relationship. Because I had a kind, caring, generous, supportive, loving, compassionate person in my life. Several partners that I have hurt over the years because I felt righteous. And so when that switch happened, boy, it changed me. It was the very beginning of what I needed to do to change myself. And one of the biggest changes was always putting myself in the other person's shoes. Turning on that empathy. Asking myself if I would like to be treated the way I'm treating this person. And when I did that and continued doing that, that is what kept me grounded. It's what helped me heal and started changing my ways. And ever since then, I promised myself that I would never be that person again. And if I ever felt the emotional triggers come up that I used to feel, I would make sure to reflect on those triggers and figure out why I had a problem coping in that moment. What was causing those triggers? Because it's never about the moment. I think a lot of people know that emotional triggers happen because of something in the past, and it's usually not about the moment. The stimulus is in the moment. If my partner does something in the moment that makes me angry, I can say, yes, she made me angry, but why am I angry? What is causing this anger? And then I can usually attribute it to something a long time ago. It's hard to make that connection sometimes, but you can almost always attribute the anger or the upset or the sadness or anything that you're feeling nowadays to something that happened a long time ago. Even something that seems like it's not a big deal. Oh, my mom didn't pick me up that day and I felt sad about it, but I moved on. And then something happens today, and then I'm having that same feeling I had when my mom didn't pick me up that day. What does that mean? And the stimulus occurs today where somebody didn't call me. And two different situations, but now I feel upset. Now I feel triggered. And I'm mainly talking about emotionally abusive people who become triggered. They're acting out. They are unable to cope with what's going on, so they do emotionally abusive behaviors that they learned a long time ago. And this is, in many cases, not all, but that's typically what happens, is that you will have somebody that is reacting to a situation that isn't about the moment, but it's something inside them that needs addressing, that needs reflecting, that needs to change, that needs to heal. And the victim of this abusive behavior has to deal with it until they take another step for themselves. That next step might be talking to the person saying, if you don't change, I'm leaving. Or maybe it's just leaving, or maybe it's just changing your own behaviors, but hopefully not going into a reactive abusive state, which is where I started, which is leading to what I'm talking about today. And I talked about a lot already, but this kind of sets the foundation for what I'm talking about now, which is this message that I received quite some time back. This person wrote that they were in a relationship where the person they were with, this person wrote, it boils down to refusing accountability and blaming me and my, quote, approach. He acknowledged his abusive behavior toward me. He even joined a program for it for a short time, and he asked for my help and insight to change himself. So it sounded like he was on track for some change, hopefully. But then this person goes on, I swear he was genuine in his declarations of stopping the violence, but there was always some kind of caveat that placed blame onto me for his behaviors. Sometime in the relationship, after being spat on, cheated on, lied to, called horrid names, my things broken, I started to react in emotionally violent ways. This, of course, has given him fuel to accuse me of being abusive, and he has doubled down on refusing accountability because of it. I have done so much research into this, and your podcast has been a great resource as well. I see how my behavior has caused more conflict, and also how it could be described as abusive. There's so much more to everything, and I'm losing my mind trying to find help sorting it all out. Resources all point to abandoning the whole thing, but I see how both of our stories coexist in objective reality, and that's where resolution could live, right? I want to thank that person for sharing that, and I'm going to say, no, that's not where the resolution lives. The resolution lives inside of you, not inside the relationship. I'll explain this in a moment, but I want to ask you this question. Let's just say that you were single. You hadn't met this person yet, and you hadn't experienced any abusive relationships in the past, and you were single, and maybe you've had some, quote, normal relationships, healthy relationships, or somewhat healthy. And now you're single, and your best friend says, hey, I've got this person I want you to meet. Now, this person he has a tendency to spit on you. When he gets mad, he'll spit on you, or she or them. They will get mad and they will sometimes spit. So can I introduce you to them? Can we go on a double date and you can meet my friend? What are you going to say? You already know the answer. Of course not. I don't want to get with somebody who gets mad and spits on me. That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so scratch that. And let's just say that they don't spit. But my friend, he likes to cheat on his partner every now and then. I'm just going to use he, a lot easier. He likes to cheat on his partner every now and then. What do you think? It's only every now and then, so, you'll make up in between and everything will be fine. Do you want to meet him? Because, you're single and you're looking for a relationship, so what do you think about that? I know the answer. You know the answer, of course. Well, how about this? My friend, he doesn't cheat, he doesn't spit, but he lies a lot, or at least he lies every now and then. And he might call you horrid names every now and then. He might break your things every now and then. But he's a really great guy. Would you like to meet him? And you know where I'm going with this. I am setting up the foundation of who you were before the relationship began and who you would choose as someone to be with. And knowing these things ahead of time, the answer that you would give when I ask you, would you like to meet this person? Because most, if not all of us that are hearing this right now are going to say, hell no, this is not the person for me. I don't want anything to do with that person. So something changes when we get into a relationship with somebody who starts doing these things. What is the change? The change is inside of you, and the change that they're doing is something that it was always inside of them. It was inside of them somewhere because it doesn't come out of nowhere. But inside of you, something changed. We fell in love, perhaps. We are giving them the benefit of the doubt. We know that they're better because we've seen so many other sides of them, but these behaviors exist. And now I know this is not helpful. This is not something you can go back in time and change. But it's important you understand. I'm talking to the person who wrote to me. It's important that you understand that the person you were would have made different choices. I'm going to guess you would make different choices, and you would choose not to be with a person like this. And that reveals who you were because of the choices you'd make then. But then we get tied up, we get committed, we fall in love. But why should that change what we want for ourselves? Why should falling in love and making commitments and making a promise, and some people see marriage as a promise to God. You commit to each other and you promise to God if, that's your religious belief. And even if it's not, it's a commitment of some sort. So we lock ourselves in to something that we believe in. We believe this is going to make us happy and fulfill us in so many ways. And so we get into these commitments. We lock ourselves in. So that doesn't mean we change, though. It just means this is who I am dedicating my life to and with. And I am here for this person. They are here for me. And you know how it works. This is how it's supposed to work. We're supposed to be here for each other and live our life together. And it's me, it's you, and it's us. It is that perfect trifecta that we're supposed to enjoy going forward. And yes, we're going to have challenges, but we're going to get through those challenges together. We're going to make it work. And so we stay committed to our commitments. And when we stay committed to our commitments, how often do we go back? Because maybe we're a very honest person and we are dedicated and loyal, and we don't want to fall back on our commitments. We want to show the person that we're with, our friends, our family, the universe, God, whatever it is. We want to show that that's who we are. That's who I am. I'm not the type of person to break my commitments. That's not me. And of course, falling in love is a chemical change inside of you, and you feel like you need to try harder with this person because you're in love with them and they're in love with you maybe, and it's all tied up. It's intertwined. It gets messy sometimes. It gets really enmeshed. And when you're enmeshed like that, it is very difficult to break that enmeshment, especially if it's a toxic enmeshment, especially if there's a trauma bond where you feel like you're constantly in between a love and abuse state, where you feel like you can't feel loved and worthy and important with somebody unless there is a huge difficulty or abusive situation. So you tie those together, like I can't feel love without hurtful behavior. There's all kinds of things that are tied up in a trauma bond, but basically what happens is we conflate the love and the abuse, and they almost act as a single necessary thing in the abusive relationship. And so we get tied up into that, defining love as being hurt, and also looking for those loving moments, looking for those wonderful, happy moments that we remember and that we so look forward to. And they decrease in frequency. Unfortunately, they just continue decreasing in frequency. So most of the time you're unhappy, and every now and then you're happy, maybe. It's a grim picture. I'm sorry. That's how it is for some people. And the reason I asked that question of if you were single and you learned that the person that you're going to be with might spit on you, might lie on you, might cheat on you, or will spit on you, lie on you, cheat on you, like this person had to go through, what would you say then? And why is that different, the decision you would have made then, than it is today, the decisions you make today? Why is that different? And I talked about the enmeshment. I talked about the commitment to your commitments. You might say, I'll never break that bond. This is what God wants for us. This is what we're supposed to do when we are with somebody. We're supposed to travel through the thick and thin. I've said this before, but whenever there is any type of abuse in a relationship, it violates and negates the relationship contract. Someone spitting on you is a violation of the relationship contract. It's negated. Someone hitting you, definite violation. Someone hurting you, sexually abusing you, violation. It's negated. The commitment is negated. Being insulted, being called names, having your things broken, being lied to. Some people accept that as part of the relationship. I don't. It is a violation of the relationship contract that I have with my wife. And I'm not talking about the marriage contract, although that is the same to me. The relationship contract is my commitment and her commitment to the relationship, to each other. And when that gets violated, then the rules change. So when you are with somebody who changes the rules and starts doing things against the relationship contract, they are saying that the relationship contract that you agreed to is no longer valid. And because it's no longer valid, this is my point. The promises that you made, the commitments that you made, don't apply anymore. And I know what that sounds like. That sounds like, well, if they cheat, that means I can cheat. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying if they lie, you can lie. And I'm not talking about the reactions that you might have to their behaviors. I'm talking about how you view your commitment, your promises, how deeply invested you are into a relationship where you think it's a bad idea to break your commitment because that's not who you are. In fact, you can't see it as you breaking any type of commitment at all because it was already broken. In this situation that I described, your commitment was terminated. Your contract, your contractual obligation was null and voided by their behavior. So this essentially frees you from the obligation that you have. It's weird how I'm saying this, and I know it's probably turning some people off because some people think marriage is forever and you're going to go through it no matter what. But if they break the contract, if they violate what I call the relationship contract, which is the basic boundaries, the basic criteria of a healthy, loving, caring relationship, if they violate those in such ways that I described, then to me, that violates the relationship contract and doesn't hold you to it anymore. It doesn't mean I'm telling you to leave. It doesn't mean I'm telling you that it's time to get a divorce or time to separate. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that once the relationship contract has been violated and technically negated, it might be time to rewrite it and renew it. That rewrite might be together, it might be apart. That rewrite might be you saying this needs to change or else. Or, hey, when you say this or when you do this, it really hurts me. I don't want that to happen anymore. I don't want to be hurt by someone who's supposed to lift me up and make me feel good. I don't want what you're doing anymore. This is not good for me. It's not good for the relationship. And guess what? It's definitely not good for you, because the more you do it, the less I want to be here. The less attracted I am to you, the more repulsive you are to me, and the longer this goes on, the farther you push me away. So something needs to change. That's when the relationship contract is rewritten and signed in blood. Meaning you are committed now. This is not going to change from this point on. And that doesn't mean we don't have disagreements. Doesn't mean we don't argue. It just means this behavior, what's going on now, has to change. And some people are going to stick through it and try to work things out, which is great. And some people are going to leave saying they're not going to change, so I'm protecting myself. I'm going to do what I need to do to protect me. So this is what I need to do. And that's great too. Whatever works for you, whatever you need to do to make sure that you feel accepted as you are. And that might mean leaving someone who can't do that. You need to feel accepted exactly as you are. That doesn't mean you are perfect. In fact, it's wonderful when you can accept somebody, imperfections and all. I love that Asha, my wife, accepts me imperfections and all. And I love her imperfections and all. It is how we're built. And if her imperfections bothered me so much, which would be me not being accepting, but if let's just say that they bothered me so much and I couldn't take it, why would I give her a hard time about it? Why wouldn't I just say, well, I can't take it. I can't be around you. You have all these imperfections. Again, that's being unaccepting. But let's just say that was it. Let's just say I was emotionally abusive and I couldn't accept her imperfections. I couldn't accept how she did this and how she said that and all the time she spent doing that. If I can't stand those things, why am I with her? It really comes down to my responsibility for what I'm going to do for myself. So that's why I put that challenge onto emotionally abusive people. If you don't like it, why are you with them? Why are you trying to change someone? Because the more you try to change someone, the more you push them away. The more you try to control them and try to mold them into who you want them to be, the more you push them away. So the emotionally abusive person, if they just get that through their skull, like I wish I had 20 years ago, but I had to learn, and this is what happens, we have to learn, that most people don't like to be controlled. And most people want their autonomy and independence and to be accepted as they are. That's what they want. And if you're the type of person who doesn't want that, then you're probably not listening to this show. So I'm going to assume that everyone listening right now wants to be accepted as they are. And, my disclaimer is always pick your battles wisely. Sometimes you'll tell someone, I don't like when you do that. Would you please stop? And they get worse. Or they get violent. And I don't want you to be with a violent person, but if you are, you know what incites them. You know what triggers them, and you just have to be careful around them. And I can already hear people writing to me now telling me, you should tell people to leave violent situations. You should tell people that they shouldn't be anywhere near a violent person, especially if it's their partner. You should tell them to leave. I hear that. I hear you, because that's what I want to say. I want to say that you're lovable and worthy and you don't deserve that treatment. Nobody deserves that treatment. Why are you with that person? That's what I want to say, but I know the truth. The truth is, when you're in an emotionally abusive or physically abusive relationship, what you are facing is a lot of difficult decisions, a lot of life-changing decisions. And I know that is going to affect your forward progress. And what I like to do in this show is instill these seeds of thought so that you can start building a solid foundation of good decision making, of healthy decision making. So when it comes to making a decision for yourself or for your relationship or for your family, by then the seeds of thought will have blossomed into helping you make the best decisions and helping you take the right steps that are needed for your peace of mind. And knowing that you may have probably tried everything you can, and now you need to take this next step. And the next step could be just having a long conversation, could be leaving, could be talking to a lawyer, could be talking to your partner, talking to your kids. It could just be a long conversation, a long, hard conversation that you just need to have. And when you have it, then you can move forward. Because sometimes we don't have any conversation and we never move forward. Or sometimes we don't do anything and nothing changes. And I've learned after all this time that if one person doesn't change, nothing changes. And if you're expecting an emotionally abusive person to change, you may never see change in your relationship, at least until you initiate it, in most cases. So coming back to this person who wrote, no, these stories cannot coexist in an objective reality where resolution could live. And the reason I say that is because one person has to make a change in order for the other person to either go along with that change or reject it. So what does that mean? That means sometimes a victim of abusive behavior has to say, no, I'm not going to take that anymore, and this is what I want going forward. And if this thing going forward, what I want going forward doesn't happen, then it's not going to work. So the other person can choose to say, well, I don't want you to leave. I don't want to break up or whatever. So I guess I will do this going forward, which sounds very contrived. Doesn't sound serious at all. You would hope that the person who heard that says, oh my God, you're serious, and I know you're serious, and I realize now that I have been hurting you for all this time. I need help. I need to work on this seriously. So one person has to change in order for change to take place. And if you change and they change too, great. But if you change and they don't, and they keep pointing the finger, they're not learning anything. They're not healing. They just want you to be who you were so they can continue being who they were, which means no change. And the reason I asked you those questions about, would you go out with this person? Would you date this person who's going to spit on you? I wanted to plant that seed because who you are today needs to remember who you were back then and combine those two. You need to integrate who you were and the decisions that you would have made back then with who you are today, and know that you don't deserve any of this behavior. And if that behavior happens again, that's your threshold. That's your intoleration point. You are done. You can tolerate no more. And I talked about reactive abuse. This person says they became reactively abusive, and they did so because they couldn't get their point across. They couldn't stop the person from hurting the person who wrote, and they just couldn't communicate. So they finally did some behaviors that the other person probably heard because it was abusive right in their line of thought, right in their language. I'm going to speak your language by being abusive just like you are. And they probably heard it, but it doesn't stop the cycle. And I don't blame the person for being reactively abusive. It's not a fault. It's something that when you have no choice, when you've tried everything else, it's what happens. I mean, with a lot of people, it happens to a lot of people. They just become the person that is being abusive toward them just to see if they'll hear them, just to see if that person will stop the behaviors. Let me conclude with this. In almost every case, almost every single case that I've seen, that I've worked with abusive people and couples and victims, in almost every case, the abuser only changed when they realized the threat of the relationship ending was real. Period. That's like 99% of the time. 99% of the time, the abuser only changed when they knew for a fact that the relationship was going to end or did end. That's when many of their eyes will open. Not everyone. Some of them will not change then either. But in most cases, almost all, the abuser finally changes when they realize that the relationship is ending, or the threat is serious enough. The threat of the relationship ending is serious enough that it shakes their foundation. They realize that, oh, life really is going to change for me. I better do something about it. And then hopefully they snap out of it and realize, oh, I'm actually hurting someone. It's not other people's fault. I'm not the victim to everyone else's behavior. I am doing the behavior to make everyone else a victim. When that happens inside of them, that's when they have the most chance of healing. Again, it's not every time. Not everyone will do this, but the main reason emotionally abusive behavior doesn't stop is because the emotional abuser doesn't think the threat of the relationship ending is real. They just don't think it. They just think, well, they'll say that, but the relationship will go back to normal and I won't have to worry about it. I won't have to change. And so if that reality never kicks in for them, there may be a possibility that they'll never change. And that puts the victim of abusive behavior in a very difficult situation, because that means that there might be a life-changing decision they have to make saying, oh, you better change or else, and that or else has to be real. And if they don't think it's real, they may not change. I'm not saying they won't. Sometimes you will have a conversation and they will. Sometimes some people need a proverbial smack on the head where you say, look, you're doing this. You better stop. So to the person who wrote, I don't have a solution for you, but I hope I planted enough seeds to help you make the decision that works for you. And again, pick your battles wisely. Some people aren't worth getting into any type of emotional or physical, especially scuffle. You don't want to get into any type of situation where somebody can do more harm to you than they've already done. So just be careful around that. Thanks for writing, and thanks for listening to another episode of Love and Abuse. Share this with others who might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. The workbook helps you pinpoint exactly what's going on in your relationship, outlining the behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. Take the assessment in the workbook and gain clarity on what your next best steps are. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. And if you've discovered that you are doing the hurtful behaviors to someone that you care about and you'd like to change that about yourself, sign up for the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. You can take the course on your own at your own pace or join the optional private online group where I and others will give you direct support. It's time to stop making those you love feel bad. Visit healedbeing.com. If you're looking for a safer way to listen to this show, where all the titles to the episodes are changed, click on the Safe Listening button on the podcast page over at loveandabuse.com. This show exists to remind you that you are not alone and you are not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant, because you are.